the Inner Game podcast, brought to you by the Science of Excellence, presented by Rob Hume, the leading elite athlete mental performance coach. Unleash your power.
Cool. So, welcome onto the show. We have a former Olympian, Guin Batten. Guin won the silver medal in the Sydney Olympics back in 2000. She has also set records for crossing the English Channel. And we are very fortunate today to have somebody who's willing to come on and share her experiences about the physical, mental, emotional challenges of sport and life, and try to pass on her wisdom and truths to anybody who wishes. So thanks again, Guin, for coming on.
Rob, it's a pleasure, absolute pleasure.
I mentioned some things there about the Sydney Olympics and the record for the English Channel. Are there any other things from that list that you think I should have included?
Oh, well, I guess, Rob, it's a bit of an interesting one, really. I sort of always chasing things. I'm one of these people that while I like being where I am every now and again, after a while I get a little bit frustrated and I always look over the field. I look into the other field and the grass is always a little bit more exciting there. So I'm forever taking on challenges in different ways. Sometimes they're physical challenges, sometimes they're organizational challenges, sometimes they're working with people. So I guess what other things have I achieved? I guess, for me, I did go out and we did help Great Britain win our first ever female Olympic silver medal in the quad scull all those years ago in Sydney. I came out, did that English Channel crossing, which still stands today, actually. And not many people are crazy enough to take such a skinny boat across the English Channel. But I've then gone on and taken the first British women's crew to row from New York to the UK, so ocean rowing side. Got a stack of world records in that spot. And, been on and done World Championships in coastal, which is a non-Olympic discipline of rowing, where we race out on the sea and not quite skinny boats, but not quite fat ones, and got 2 World Championships medals in those bits. So, and then really what I'm doing now is trying to help other people go out and achieve now. So I do a bit of coaching of ocean boats. I'm helping Great Britain with their team at the moment around beach sprints, which is an emerging format for rowing. I've got a group called the Blisterhood, and every now and again, when we have a couple of really good weeks, we usually go and take on a stretch of really remote coastline and absolutely nail it. It's a bit like, how you might take on a mountain really quickly. You have very little gear, you'll go up hard and fast and try and find a short weather window. That's what we do around, Land's End or the Lizard or off in Ireland. We do some quite extreme bits, go very fast. So do lots of other crazy stuff that never really makes it out into the news.
So that's pretty damn incredible, that, Gwen, that's for sure. And you started to mention there how you've taken on other challenges as well outside of sport. Could you perhaps expand on some of those as well?
Yes, really interesting. So I was always, when I was at university, I was always wanting to help be part of the people who are organizing stuff. I don't want to just be the person in the spotlight. Also want to influence from behind. If you want to be involved in the decision making, you've got to be more than just the athlete. And so university, I sort of got a little bit involved in that sort of organizational side, did more and more, and then ended up working. My professional, when I was at university, of course, was an exercise physiologist, and went into that sector. So being part of the athlete support team. And then really when I was on the British team, I was the athlete representative. Right. Then went on to chair the British Olympic athletes committee in that space, set up what is now the British Athletes Commission, which is probably the membership organisation for our elite athletes outside of professional sport, and then went on to the World Rowing's Athletes Commission, then went on to the Junior Commission, then now I chair my own commission and I sit on World Rowing Council, so I run the Women's 8's Head of the River race, which is an epic race. We've been going for like 84 years or something, and it's just women, 2,500 women all race down the Thames. So I help organise that. And of course, I'm a director of Henley Royal Regatta. So I was the first female director of that. So again, trying to give back to the sport has been a massive part. And I'm an umpire, so I put my blazer on and go out and wave my flags about.
I think what you're trying to say, Guin, is that you keep yourself busy.
Yeah, on days like this, I sometimes think, why did I say yes? Can I not learn to say no?
Well, I certainly appreciate you for saying yes, Guin, that's for sure. It's interesting you say how you kind of have these transitions where you've obviously spent so much of your time striving to do the physical, challenge yourself physically and obviously mentally, but then you've obviously challenged yourself in these other ways, being part of these organizations, being part of sport in the background, doing the things that isn't so
isn't not just on the pitch but around the pitch.
Yeah.
That volunteering, and I think the reason why I do it is because I have this overwhelming desire that sport has given me so much that I want to give back. It was amazing, all those people that helped me from this really snotty, horrible child to who I became. And I became that. I didn't learn the rules of life and the rules of school. I learned those through sport.
Yeah.
And my desire to give back is so deep, and that's why it's so easy to do it. And that's why I can't say no.
Yeah, I can certainly relate to that. I as well as the sports psychology work, the mental performance coaching I do with athletes, I am also a PE teacher. I'm a head of PE at a school, and I've done that role for nearly 20 years. And I was at a deeper level, like you're talking about there, when I, from pretty much right at the start of going into teaching, my main driver was just to inspire young people to find sport and use it and make the most out of it. Because even though I didn't go far in sport at all, in this short window in my life as a kid, it gave me something that I just didn't have, which was confidence and belief in myself. As a young lad, I was quite introverted, quite shy, quite anxious for lots of different reasons. But when I realised that I could start running around a grass pitch, kicking a white bag of wind, aka football, and I realised that I could get good at it, and I was getting praise from it, and I was getting success from it, it changed me. It changed me so much. And from that, then in going from nowhere to then getting good at something, to then having like this spark of imagination in my mind of where do I want to go with this? It gave me the opportunity to dare to dream something big. My dream, I was desperate to. My hero at the time was an Italian footballer called Roberto Baggio, and my dream was to go and play for Juventus because that's where he used to play. And I wanted to leave this country. I wanted to go there, and I wanted to wear his number 10 and carry on what he did. That was what I wanted to do.
And I think, Rob, there's something really in that transition period as a young person, or that was teaching you, and you didn't go on and do that, but what you realized was that you had direction.
Yeah.
And then you create, what do I do to achieve that? And by putting those building blocks in, okay, your end goal moved, but the bits that you were learning around that, and that was sport that was giving you that. And I think there's something, There's something really cool about sport. So if, for example, I experiment with my behavior in life, sometimes the consequences of that can be pretty rough. Yeah. You know, if you experiment with the law in life, the law's going to come down on you. You know, if you experiment in school about the rules of school, school's going to come down on you. You're going to get labeled as being disrupted. But if you experiment in sport, in the rules of sport, what you'll find is, rather than the consequences being massive, it's your peers that bring you back in line, and you learn those things, and you learn how to then work as part of a team, and you create this, and it's that microcosm that it gives to you at that critical age that allows you not to make those massive mistakes. You know, and I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for sport. I'm sure I would not have got any qualifications. I'm sure I'd be, you know, roughing it somewhere, you know, probably still in trouble with loads of different sets of community. You know what I mean? But sport taught me that. And what was really interesting was it was my teachers that understood that. Yeah. And, you know, so I didn't get diagnosed as being dyslexic till I was about 15, 16 years old. They just thought I was a troublemaker. They just thought I was not very intelligent, yet I was really intelligent in other things. You know, they couldn't quite work it out. And at one particular school I went to, unfortunately, my parents were very good at it. I didn't realize I'd been asked to leave when I left. Very well. But I got asked to leave basically because the school couldn't understand me because I couldn't understand them. Yeah. I would be particularly young. My parents lived overseas, so I went to boarding school age 9. You know, so it was radically different messing around in Africa bare feet to come to the UK wearing a skirt and, you know, not doing anything at the weekends and just sitting in the boarding house or whatever it was. That I really struggled with that transition. So I went to another school, and that school basically, you know, there was not a moment in the day where you weren't given something to do or you weren't doing something, you know, and what they worked out was that I loved being physical. And so what they did was they used that to steer my behavior in many ways. I mean, that sounds manipulative. It wasn't at all. I'll give you a classic example. So I was really, really good at table football, and I loved table football. There was a table football machine, but I was the youngest kid in that group. We had 3 years that were allowed to play on this table football machine. And the rule was, if you could win, you stayed on the table football machine. And if I could get on the table, I could stay on all evening because I was pretty good at it. For some reason, my wrists do this funny thing. So yeah, so I was pretty good. But because I was so young, if I stood at the front of the queue, all the older boys, because very few girls would get on it, would come in because they queue barged me because they were older than me, and I would just get further back. So there was not a chance I was ever going to get. But the school decided they were going to introduce this grade system, and the grade system was based on how hard you tried, not how successful you were. Really? And you'd get points on how hard you tried. So I worked out pretty quickly. If I wrote really neatly, colored everything in, I'd get really high effort grades. Oh. And the effort grades allowed you to leave homework. We had to, because it was boarding school, we had to go do homework in the evening. We were allowed to leave homework half an hour earlier than everybody else. No. And so by getting enough points, I could leave half an hour earlier. And because I was small and I was pretty quick, I could run out of the homework room into the room where the table football machine, get on the table football machine and stay on it all night because I could win. That was why I started working.
Yeah, that is fantastic. Yeah. Just as you were saying that, I was thinking how clever it was of your school and your teachers there. To reward effort over achievement, essentially. And as you were saying that, the thing that triggered into my mind, I'm not sure if you've heard of her work, but of Carol Dweck's work, The Growth Mindset, and how you shouldn't reward, you know, somebody doing well. You reward them in terms of their effort, the amount of effort that they're putting in. Keep rewarding the effort, because it's ultimately, you know, that mindset, that mentality, which is driving the effort, which leads to success, and over rewarding at times and only praising those that you know are successful at something doesn't, you know, quite often doesn't lead to long-term success.
Yeah, and I'm absolutely with you, especially with youngsters, because quite often, if you're just rewarding performance in sport, let's say, you're everybody's growing at different rates, so we've got late developers in there. Some people have got genetically perhaps more uh, opportunity in one space or whatever. And as a youngster, I remember thinking that I wanted to be really, really successful at sport. I wanted it more than anything, but I also realized that I wasn't good enough, so I would, I was good to a certain standard. So I was good within my school, but I wasn't good when I went beyond the boundaries of my school.
Yeah.
And for me, I didn't really care what sport I played. I just loved sport. I didn't care whether but I wanted to represent Great Britain. I wanted to be an international athlete. That was my dream. And in fact, when I remember watching, and this shows you my age now, and apologies for all your listeners, I remember watching I think it was the Moscow Olympic Games, and it was Coe and Ovette, and they were saying these amazing things about them on television. And I wanted to be there. I wanted to be in the center of that track with people saying nice things about me. I didn't want to win an Olympic gold medal. I didn't want to win, I just wanted to be there because people would, I think, say nice things about me. I would be respected, because I think this old issue thing for me was around respect.
Yeah.
I'm a second child in a family of three. I've got a bigger sister and a younger brother. So I was the same sex as the elder child. So I've got really bad second child syndrome. And my siblings will tell you that I have it really badly. But that was my driver, and so everything I did everything that I could. And I remember realizing, how old must have been? I must have been maybe 15, 16, 17, maybe more likely 17, realizing that I wasn't good enough to represent Great Britain.
Yeah.
And I remember really, really being upset by that, but at the same time realizing, what, I'm not going to be able to represent Great Britain at one sport. I'm going to be as good as I can, as many sports as I can. And I did stacks and stacks. And in fact, when I went to first university, I played 5 sports at university.
No.
It had a little bit of a negative effect on my degree for a while. But you know what I mean? I just did everything, and I met loads of amazing people and experienced loads of stuff. And then I at the same time I took up rowing. And rowing was one of those sports I wasn't great at first off. So normally when I take up a sport, I'm pretty good quite quickly, and then it sort of plateaus out. This one I was really rubbish at. We have a thing in rowing, which is a race for people who've never won a race. And normally you win it in your first year. It took me 3 years to win it. And just to explain that I'm not exaggerating, somebody who was in my novice boat also went on to be an international rower. It wasn't because we were just not very good. But I became fascinated by it. Became really fascinated. Why was I quite good at other sports, but then plateaued and couldn't get really, really good? Why was it that this one was different? And so I played around with it, spent 3 or 4 years playing around with getting to a half decent level and then slipping back and all of these things. You play a little journey in your 20s when you have to move around for work and stuff and university. And then I went to my first national team trials. And this was probably the most defining moment of my career. I went to my first national team trials, and I came in the top. So it was the top 6 people. Okay, and you have to row in pairs in rowing. So when you're doing sweep, so one person rows one way and you row the other. So there's 2. So you only ever perform together.
Yeah.
And so I came in the top 6. So I came 3rd. So in the top 6 of people, they selected 6 people for the World Championships that year. They didn't include me in that list.
Whoa.
And so I picked up the phone and I said to the chief coach, I said, I came in the top 6. You've selected 6 people. Why didn't you choose me? So it must have been an active decision to not include me into that by the chief coach. And he said to me, Guin, you are too small. You will never be an international rower.
Yeah.
So purely not on my performance, but on my stature, I was told. And that was probably the most defining moment. And I don't know how you want to explore about its psychology. Had that not happened to me, I don't think I would have been the athlete that went out and won this. Because exactly 12 months to that very weekend, I was ranked 8th in the world in the single scull. And there is something about kickbacks. There's something about when someone closes a door, you realize how much you really want something. So you might want something, but then there's you really want something. And I think that for me was a critical part in my growth as an athlete.
Yeah, that's certainly something that I spent quite a bit of time researching in the work that I've done. Large part of what I started at university. My dissertation 20 odd years ago was essentially looking at why talented athletes fail. Why is it that you get talented athletes that go on and fulfill their potential? And why is that you can get way more, especially who have all this potential and then they just drop off? Why is it? And at that time at university, I was also playing a lot of tennis, and I was a tennis coach, and we had one of the regional tennis centres, one of the regional national tennis centres at our university. So we'd get from all around like Yorkshire and that side of England, all the best tennis players would come across there. And the coaches that were part of the national, I wasn't coaching at that level, I was just coaching at grassroots, but within that. But the coaches there who were coaching these under 18s down to under 12s were all players to a very high level themselves. So I used that environment as my study, and just started asking questions, trying to just dig underneath, get inside the mind of the coaches. Why didn't you quite achieve what you wanted to achieve, or did you achieve it? What went wrong? What were the barriers? And then I do the same with all the athletes. And there was a lad there. I won't mention his name, but he was the number one ranked British tennis player from 12 years of age to 17, and he was coming up around the game around when just before Andy Murray, but the LTA was kind of looking at him like they would have looked at Andy Murray. They thought he was going to be the thing, because the LTA, no offense LTA, but they haven't been very successful at all in producing world-class tennis players. They pump more money into tennis than any other tennis body on the planet, and yet have the least amount of success. So something isn't right. And I became relatively, for a short period of time, close friends with this lad, because he was only like 3 or 4 years younger than me. And even after doing the interviews with him, talking to him, and I'd meet up with him after, we ended up doing our level 2 tennis coaching badges together. And I'm like, what are you doing here with me? Why are you here with me doing this tennis coaching course when you should be off around the world playing tennis? He was ranked top 20 in the world as a junior. He beat Andy Roddick as a junior. That's the level that he was at. And he got to junior Wimbledon semi-final in doubles, and knocked out the number 1 seed, and then the final was the next day. But that night before playing the final, he went out and got drunk. And I was like, how? I couldn't get it into my head, because if I was him, there was no way that I would have ever let that go. Do you know what I mean? That opportunity. And my dissertation there just ignited this kind of fuel inside of me. Also combined it with the fact that I didn't get to do what I wanted to do. I just needed to know why, how are they doing it? How are people like you doing it? How is Steve Redgraves coming back doing it 5 times? How is Roger Federer doing it? How are these how Serena Williams doing these incredible things, how are they doing it? And I then left university, and I just never stopped looking into this, and everything just in the end just kept bringing me back to the brain, the mind. They're doing something differently in here that other people aren't able to do, either consistently or in key moments. And then after that, as soon as that light bulb went on, it's like, right, I'm just going all in on finding more about the brain. And so then I've become qualified as a hypnotherapist. I'm also certified in a strand of psychology called neuro-linguistic programming, and quite a few other strands of psychology. And I just researched as much about them. And then I've tried to repackage them up, if you like. And then I try to teach people who sometimes people struggle in achieving what they achieve because of nerves. And if nerves is the only reason, that shouldn't be the reason why you can't step out into your sports arena and express yourself. I find that, really sad. And sometimes it's a values reason. They can't cope with, they want to become a sportswoman or sportsman, but they also want these other things as well. They want their friends, they want the family, they want the social side of life, and they can't get them in order, to be able to just commit to this one thing and to do what you've done. I'm sure you will have had to make lots of, if sacrifices are the right word, or different choices, either way, you've had to cut some things out to do what you did. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting, and because everyone's different and everybody's journey is different, and what everybody's needs and desires are different. And again, that question you're asking yourself is, why do some youngsters make it, and some youngsters that don't necessarily look like they're going to make it, why do they go on to be? Yeah. And I think this is the same in sport, in art, in business, in academia. I don't think it's unique just to sport. I do think there are certain sports where the genetics do have a role to play. Yeah. But if you look at your more complex, and I wouldn't say in a derogatory way, but where there's more multiple facets that go into to be successful in the sport, I think work rate and other things become more important. The ability, the capacity to work, the desire to tolerate, the desire to put other parts of your life on hold to allow this. But what's really interesting is, Rob, so when I exited my sport, I couldn't understand, why was I too small, too fat, etc. And why did I achieve where the other guys who were so gifted and so successful, and even that, my physiology is not great. I've got normal size lungs for a normal person. I don't have lungs that are big. I hit my VE when I'm at max oxygen uptake. I'm absolutely, the pedal is on the floor, the engine is going completely, where most people have additional capacity in their engine, and genetically, my sister, she was in the boat with me when we won our medal. So, I have her genetics as well to compare as an exercise physiologist. And I was the exercise physiologist to the team, so I know what my competitors or my guys were that I was in boats with, what their physiology was. So I asked that question, and I was the chair of the British Athletes Commission after Sydney. And what we did was, I was asked, it was to do with the Youth Sport Trust. I don't know whether you know the Youth Sport Trust. The Youth Sport Trust are one of the charities that use the power of sport to help people's lives. And they work quite extensively with PE teachers. And they were really interested to do some work around how, what is it that we learn in sport that can help youngsters on the verge of exclusion? How can we help them to get a grip of the rules of school, in essence, to be able to achieve their potential. And I was playing around with this question, and so I sat in this room, and I remember we were I think we were in the anyway, we're downtown somewhere in town. I better not start using organizations' names, but we were in there, and I said to the guys, I've got a psych to put together all of the attributes around what make people successful.
Yeah.
We had them all, and I looked at them all, and we basically said, we don't understand all these words. These words, you know, what do they mean? You know, they're all long. They don't have relevance and in our lives. And there's too many of them. We want to narrow them down, and we came up with what we called 6 keys. Okay. To success. And it was a program that Sky Sport ran for 10 years, and they took athletes into schools. Those athletes would try and talk about them, you know, and these came from these athletes. It wasn't, I mean, the site pulled out the initial bits, but it was reinterpreted by the athletes. And quite a few of these athletes then went on a couple of months later to the Athens Olympics and came home with medals. And this was the 6 things that they said that were really important. So mental toughness, resilience, the ability to cope and through that journey was really, really important. Then the next one, and then order of priority, the next one was really much about that hunger to achieve. You know, and I think that's what you touched on is that you really want to achieve something. And for me, I realized when I was told that I was too small and I wouldn't be good enough, I realized that I really wanted it, because for most people, they could have just taken that at face value and walked away.
Yeah.
But my desire to go and find another way, and of course, my other way was to go into a boat where I was on my own, so I could never be judged with somebody else. Do you see what I mean? So that's why I went into the single scull. Sports knowledge and life knowledge. So how do you become an expert? Are you fascinated with the process of your sport? Do you spend all the time watching videos about your sport? Are you really, really fascinated with it? I think there's also something, the 5th one in there, which was the one I always felt really, really important, was called breaking barriers. How prepared are you to step out of the world you're in?
Yeah.
And that's quite hard to do. So,
very.
You know, if you're going to win an Olympic gold medal, probably going to have to break a world record.
Yeah.
To break a world record, you can't just do what everybody else has done. You've got to find new ways of doing that, you know. And not quite often, you know, if you look at, we would often go into schools and talk to the guys, you know, how many PE teachers are the first people in their families to go to university?
Yeah.
You know, in life, you have to break away from your community. Maybe it's like you have to choose a little bit between hanging out with your friends and going and training. And then the final one was the planning for success. And it's about turning up at the right time, you know, doing the work. You know, I worked out that if I'd missed 5 minutes of every training session of my entire life, I would have missed 6 months of training. I wouldn't even have gone to the Olympic Games if I was 5 minutes late for every session, let alone win a silver medal from a bronze medal by 4 centimeters.
Gosh, is that how close it was?
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah. And, you know, at top end of sport, the margins are tiny, you know, and that sometimes that ability to plan and be on time become really, really important at that point. So, you know, I think there's lots of really great ways of looking at it. But the interesting thing about those 6 things, not one of them was talent.
No.
One of those was about the quality of the boat or bike or training shoes that you had. Do you see what I mean in there? So it was a fascinating process. And it's funny that you and I were asking the same questions at probably at the same times in our lives.
Yeah. Certainly one of the things, the many things that stuck out there with what you said was about that ability to go beyond your boundaries, the environment that you were in, you know, especially as a child, and that's so difficult for everybody, you know. Many people aren't able to, you know, go beyond the earlier cultural impressions that they've had, whether that's their family, their friends, their local community, and people don't realize just how powerful drivers and influences those people are. And that was one of the things when I looked back at myself as a kid, is that in my head I was dreaming way bigger than my own parents were. Do you know what I mean? And but I didn't quite have the ability to. I would always say to myself, I need somebody to help me. Do you know what I mean? I needed somebody to get hold of me, and I needed more direction. I wasn't getting it, and I know there are many people that are still in a similar situation to I who then found a way of getting it, but I didn't have that ability at that age to kind of think outside the box, to go and look for the things that I needed to do. I was just really passionate and really driven, but I needed to know how to drive it, if you know what I mean. I needed a bit more expert help. I also needed a bit of luck. I had issues with injuries. And yeah, it's one of the things that I keep seeing time and time again, certainly with students and some of the younger athletes that I've worked with in trying to help them, is I can often get the sense that they're not quite prepared to commit what they need to. And I do think that sometimes that is coming from like their environmental factors influencing that. They haven't quite got the solid structures in place, which gives them that security within themselves as individuals to say no to the things that they need to be able to do the stuff that they want to do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, if I look back and I look at my journey, you can pick out coaches, peers, and it's though, you can't do it alone, right? It takes a very special person to do it alone. And in certain sports, you can do it alone, but I think in other sports, you have to be in that group. If I look at, if I look at where I was 11, 12 years old, I was doing a lot of cross country, a lot of 800 meters, 1500 meters. And there was somebody who I was with in my school year, and we were really quick.
Yeah.
You know what I mean, together, and we were pushing each other, and we would go away to, English schools, and we would go away to all these things. And unfortunately, she went to another school. She got a scholarship to another school. So I got left behind. I felt very alone in that space because I didn't have the person to, there was a particular PE teacher who then went up to a school up in the north. And we used to have to train at lunchtime. They would say, we had a multi-gym in the school, and we were told on a Monday, her and Sarah and I were told we had to come down on a Monday after school and spend half an hour on the multi-gym. Nobody taught us how to use anything. We literally used to just compete and see how we could put the entire stack on it and try and lift it all between the two of us. You know what I mean? So we were being trained, but we were playing at training. You see what I mean? Which was great. And so, and then, I was really fortunate. I went to Southampton University. Unfortunately, I dropped out because I was doing too much sport after a while, and went to study exercise physiology afterwards. But there was a group of 3 years in the boat club. And there were 7 of us that went on to be internationals out of that 3 year. So Southampton University, I think, has had 1 international in the last 20 years out of that group, 7 of us came. So there was something really special going on. I went up to Leeds Met or up to Carnegie, and there wasn't much rowing up there, but there was athletics. And I was able to be part of a group of 20 athletes. And of those 20 athletes, 4 years later, 5 of us were 4 years later, 5 of us were at the Olympic Games. I was in rowing, the others were in athletics, but just, you know what I mean? And I learned athletics was really interesting. Athletics taught me that nobody cares about you unless you're successful. And when you're successful, they care about you. But when you're not, you have to do it. It's probably one of those brutal sports because you're so alone, and that's why I think it's really hard to be in athletics. With rowing, your teammates care about you because you're in the boat with them. So therefore they want you to turn up to training. Whereas in athletics, nobody cares if you don't turn up to training. You have to do it for yourself. And I learned huge amounts in there, and I learned how to lift properly. We went and did proper Olympic lifting and went on and competed, actually, just so that we could get better at it. Learned how to do plyometrics, depth jumping, stuff that I would never have ever gone on to do it in rowing, because of course we don't push down that quickly, but it was fascinating to learn that process and be with exceptionally talented people, and then to again 4 years later see them all at the 96 Olympics was pretty cool.
I think it was. I also on that note went to that same university myself, So yeah, I certainly have some great memories of being in that place. Yeah, so when you was talking there about the environment, you know, of how many rowers came out of that one club, was it the club that you specific?
Yeah, it was the university club. You know, we were like learning that. You know, it didn't happen until we'd left. But what was really interesting? What was it? So we it's really interesting because at Southampton, the tide goes out. So you can only row at certain times of day.
Yeah.
So we'd all have to go rowing at the same time. So everybody was together. It was quite competitive, and so we'd either row really early in the morning or in the afternoon, evening, around lectures. And because the tide, it would all change. But we had this ruling that you never missed your lectures. So you trained and you might party as well, but you never missed your lectures. So it was a case of playing hard, working hard, and rowing hard. You know, it was those three things, and there was something really energetic about it. And it wasn't about winning, but it was about doing everything 100%.
Yeah.
Which comes back to that business of effort.
Yeah, and it also, how I look at that as well, it also reinforces the power of environment, culture. You know, having that energy to bounce off, to pick you up when you're not quite on it. There's someone else there to say something, give you that spark, and also that motivation. When somebody's doing better than you, and that ignites that kind of fire in you, you go, right, I'm going to chase that person down now. And I don't know if you've read Matthew Said's book, Bounce. I think it's very early on in the book anyway. It might be the beginning about how this older age gentleman went into his primary school and just started teaching table tennis, and then there was these bunch of kids that really took to it. So this older guy in the end let all these kids go into his garage and start playing table tennis. And I think it's something like by the time there was 16, 17, 18 or something like that, 5 of the country's top 10 table tennis players all came from the same street.
In Reading, isn't it? I think Matthew's from Reading, but
is that what it is? Yeah.
Yeah. It's fascinating how and I don't think it comes back to those multiple facets. What makes the bit beyond just the skill and the training? It's the other stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, do you want me to? So I went through this journey, and I remember coming into the GB team, and in 1994, when I went to my first World Championships, there were 3 heavyweight women. So there's a lightweight category and an open weight category. There were 3 open weight category rowers on the team. Right. We had a pair and a single. Right. And my mother had given birth to 2/3 of the team. It was a tiny, because my sister was on the team. The team was tiny. Now, we'll take an 8, a 4, a quad, pair, double, single, the teams are pretty big. Yeah. But it was tiny. There was very little money. With national lottery hadn't come into it. And I remember sort of as we sort of journeyed through this, and we would, I realized I needed to give up my job. I decided I didn't need to bother to pay for rent because that was too expensive, but I needed to pay for food and transport because I needed to move my rowing boat around. So I came up with the concept of a housing sponsor, and I'd go and live at someone's house when they went on honeymoon or on holiday, and I eventually got ill after a while because that was not the best way to live. And in the end, I did get an amazing housing sponsor, and I lived in their house for 7 years, and it was brilliant. While I was through my international career. But what you were trying to do was find ways that allowed you to do the training, do the distance, be in the right place at the right time, and do it as best you can. And I think those were all important. I think what you find now is when there are people that are coming into the system, they can't express themselves because they're just an athlete in a system. You know, so we've got really big programs, and when one person falls at the top of that program, there's another 10 people that will slide in and through. So, you know, your ability to be fascinated by the process, well, you can't really be fascinated by the process as much because it's, you know,
it's controlling it. Yeah.
It's so controlling. And for me, there was something that I really struggled with, that controlling, that conformism. I've always been anti-establishment anyway. And yes, you can imagine where I had some of the
That makes two of us then, that's for sure.
Yeah. And I think some people really struggle with that. I think the mental, some people like control, and some people, then they find sport makes that hard because they're not in control. I think other people like myself are much more free spirited, but I had to learn to control my free spirit to be able to make sure that in a race, because rowing's one of those races where the currency of success is your ability to take your body to the real limit.
Yeah.
So you take that race. So how am I going to get? I've got to go from A to B and maximize what my body can give. And and you can train for that. And actually endurance, it hurts. Yeah. When you're rowing a 7-minute race or a 6-minute race, it really, really hurts because basically your body's telling your brain you need to stop.
Yeah.
Because it hurts. And your body, your brain has got to turn around and say, no, it's okay. And so then, so you train your body to be as physically capable and the ability to tolerate all of that stuff.
Yeah.
You then rationalize with your brain about all of the things. So you'll say, it doesn't matter. I've been here before. I didn't die last time. I'm not going to die this time. I can't come back tomorrow because it's 4 years, isn't, till the next Olympics. Do you know what I mean? So you have all those narratives. And often what you're doing is you put your race plan in. Your race plan allows you to structure it. So I would race such a way that I would only ever be thinking about 20 strokes. So that's around about 40 seconds. And then I'd have another 40 seconds. Do you see what I mean? And so I never looked beyond because I could always get to the end of those 20 strokes. Yeah. I couldn't necessarily see where I was. And I always used to dream I was like in those movies where the ship is going down or the submarine is going down and the doors clamp shut.
Yeah.
I dreamt that I used to visualize that I was running through the submarine with the doors opening and closing as I was coming through. So if I'd had a bad bit, that was gone. The next, I was in the moment, and then so that was how your race plan operated. But I don't think that was what made us successful.
You don't?
No. And I think the bit that I think it makes you successful to a certain point. And there's something. Yeah, there's something. Yeah. There's something at the Olympic Games where so the World Championships, there's a stat. We have World Championships every year. Now every 4 years we have Olympic Games, and everybody throws the rule book out. The Olympic Games. It's like everybody goes absolutely crazy. They'll turn and do amazing things. And if you just do what you did at a normal World Championships, you won't even make the final.
Yeah.
Because everyone goes crazy. They throw the rule book out and they do phenomenal things. And then the sport's lifted to a new level and then we keep going.
Yeah.
And the critical bit is, how do you control your emotion in that space?
Yeah.
And it's going to sound really manipulative, and it's not meant to be manipulative, but it's a real skill to be able to do it. So let's say, classic one. So you're nervous before a race, really, really, really nervous. And then you start getting really tired because, of course, all this adrenaline's been running around your body. Yeah. And you've been burning extra energy, and that's free speed. So how do you control those nerves and don't use them at the beginning of the race, but use them in the race?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you've got this free bucket of energy, yeah, and you can only use it once. Where are you going to use it? And so and I often say to something it comes back to this hunger to achieve. Okay, so there's the hunger to achieve day in, day out, but then there's the hunger to achieve in the moment.
Yeah.
Okay, so if I said to you, there is a car outside your front house, the front of your house, and there's £1 million, which could you lift it and get the £1 million? All you have to do is lift the car up and get the £1 million.
If I wanted that £1 million, I'd lift the goddamn car.
Yeah. It's now your child.
Yeah.
They are dying. It's under the
It's lifted.
And to me, that's the difference between the mental motivation or the mental hunger and the emotional hunger.
Yeah.
So how can you, at the critical point in the race, turn on that emotional bit and use your free bucket? And it's fascinating. And, you know, I think the psychologists are a lot of work that the psychologists do with high performance athletes. I'd be really interested to know if they're having those types of conversations. And different people do it differently.
Yeah.
So, for example, I do it. I don't use, I think fear, pain, fear and anger, I hate to say it, are stronger than joy in bringing that. And I know it sounds wrong, and everyone at the moment says, oh, you mustn't use those things to motivate yourself. But in the middle of the race, it really hurts. And what I say to myself is the people around me are causing that. So therefore, I can go into a controlled red mist to pull me through.
Yeah.
And then the minute I get over the finish line, it's like, oh, I love everyone again. Do you see what I mean? So it's not a permanent state, but it is a way of the quickest way for this to stop is if my competitors stop, and it's their fault. Do you see what I mean? Yeah. But everybody's slightly different. Be really interested if you've heard of other endurance-based athletes using things like that.
Well, I essentially teach athletes to do that. You know, it's as you said, you used a keyword at the end there, Guin. You mentioned the word state, and a large part of what I teach athletes is how to control their state and to choose the states, the neurophysiological states that they want to be in. So different sports, you need to be in a slightly different state. You don't want to be in that state that you're describing if you're an Olympic archer. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So, and one of the things that I found, and what a really, really intelligent guy called Richard Bandler found out, was that everybody who achieves excellence in something, they have an internal strategy for doing it. And you were giving away some of the clues as to how you was doing it. And so the mind goes through this process of creating this neurophysiological state. And you can only do that pretty much really through two drivers: through the sounds that are coming into your head, i.e. what you're saying to yourself, and the things that you're visualizing. Because our construct of reality, the past, the present, and the future, is all shaped by the sensory system, what we see, hear, smell, touch, and feel. And obviously the smelling and the tasting isn't that important to us anymore. Obviously in sport, not so much anyway. But what you're saying internally, and what you're seeing internally, those two factors, they start coming together, and they start to drive the neurophysiological state. So the more you think a thought, the more it generates the feeling. The more it generates the feeling, you think the thought. Then when you start to add in, you think this thought and you see this image, when you start to get them both going, they're funneling in to create this state. So what you were able to do is reframe your mind. You was able to reframe it so that pain you was able to use the pain, as you say, those darker emotions, and channel that energy by warging it out and blaming it on the opposition. And the fact, what I found so fascinating is that you was literally visualizing a door coming down. That is going to create urgency to the subconscious mind, because that door's going to close and I'm getting under it. And what that was helping you do was create that sense of urgency. That urgency, that buzzer goes, or whatever noise gave you the cue to start the race, that door was probably closing from the moment that you set off. And that, for you, would have been such a powerful tool for yourself that you created yourself, really. to get you into what was your unique flow state for your sport. And what I teach athletes is how to. So if I was working with a rower, I never have done, then what I would do is I would try to get a little bit more information from you, but then I would take a rower and I would teach them your exact internal strategy, because your internal strategy got you a silver medal. It was your internal strategy that, as I said, that could put you in a peak state when you needed to. And you can actually, and I do, teach these strategies to other athletes, the internal strategies, and it would put any other rower into a very similar physiological state as yourself, and then they would go and do their thing. So it's entirely replicable, and each athlete who achieves excellence, greatness in their sport, they have these internal strategies that they're not even aware of. You're what's great about what you said is that you're consciously aware of what your internal strategy was. Most athletes don't have a clue how they're doing it. But when you start asking key questions, how do you do it? And that is my first question to them. They don't know. And so then when you get yourself back into that state of being back in that boat, being back in that moment, hearing that sound go off, right? When you're back in that boat and you're holding those oars and you're seeing the sun shining off the water, if it was shining, or whatever it is that you see, when you put yourself back in that state, then and only then you can get conscious awareness of what you're doing in that moment. And once you get to that, then you can replicate it again and again and again and again.
Yeah, and I think it comes back to, I'm that free spirit, and I love the water and the wildness, and I hate the constraints of everything, but I had to learn that.
Yeah.
I had to learn it, because if I was to control my mind, I was control my activity and to pace the perfect race, the only way to win it, and then to put the cherry on top of the cake, which is the release of the emotion.
Yeah.
I had to do all the control before I allowed the chaos to come in. If I put the emotion in early, this wouldn't happen.
Yeah.
It was the order in which you put the structure and you put the chaos on top. Yeah. It was fascinating, so I realized quite early on, I'd be really, really nervous. I'd be sick. I wouldn't want to go out. And I realized that I used to fall asleep within the hour of going out to race.
Right.
So I would get myself really calm. So I'd do all the jobs, get myself really calm, because you have to be there early just for lots of different reasons, because it's hard to get there or whatever. And you've done your training, you've done your pre-race talk and everything. I'd just go and find somewhere really quiet, could lie down, he'd take a little mat with me, and I would try and fall asleep. It was a very light sleep. It was never heavy. It was heavy. But what it allowed me to do is to turn everything down, every emotion. Because if you can imagine, if you're allowed to sleep, there's no adrenaline running through your body. And then I would get up, and by the time I had got to my boat, because it would take about half an hour to warm up, so that was, half an hour of getting ready, I would be physically shaking.
Really?
And so I've gone from this very low state to now starting to shake. And then when you start to exercise, that'll then go back down again in the warm up. And then I used to find out that just before I put my blades forward in the boat, you are likely to, the squared in the water is where you have to square up before the start. In the single scull, I used to start shaking again. Because of, and so it's that trying to control the emotion.
Yeah.
The emotion is so powerful, but it has to come after the physical and the mental. You can't put it in before. In rowing, you can't, because otherwise this bit goes out of control.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. It took me about 10 years to get that right.
Really? Yeah. And was that something that you literally created for yourself, or did you have somebody help you, i.e. a psychologist, help you create that?
Yeah, so what I was really lucky with in rowing is that we talk a lot. Yeah, we talk about how we feel a lot, because technically, if you're in a crew boat, you've got to be in the same mental space as each other. Yeah. So for every word you use in a race, you might have spent 100 words trying to get to that one word. So we talk a lot. Also, because I was in the single scull for the first 8 years of my career, I had to do it all. And I remember, coming off races where I'd thrown it away.
Yeah.
And I worked out that the races when I didn't throw it away, I could come off and tell you how many strokes I'd rode.
Right. I
So
see.
my level of concentration had to be so high that I didn't let stuff throw away, because I had to make sure I was on it all the time, because otherwise the negative, we used to say you'd have two monkeys on your shoulders. I used to put Vaseline on my shoulders to let them slide off. You know, because the negative, you cannot let the negative self-talk come in. And so what you did was I used to make it so busy that the negative thought couldn't come in, because I was concentrating with everything, and hence those doors closing and, you know, all of those business. And again, it was the tools that I put in my head that allowed me to perform consistently that were so powerful.
Awesome. Again, just in what you're saying there, like the power of the visual sensory system, and acknowledging those two monkeys. And did you actually put Vaseline on? Yeah. So again, as what that also brought a kinesthetic feel to it as well. So like these boys can disappear for a bit, or these girls.
I only did it once because you don't want too much grease around with your handle, otherwise you slip. But yeah.
but yeah, I find that so fascinating. That and there's so many other athletes that have created that internal pattern and structure them often themselves. You know, that's how I believe that it's these things that we're talking about here that is the real difference between achieving excellence and not. Having the ability to control your state. And as you said there, as soon as negative self-talk comes in, it knocks you out of state, because that's the conscious mind talking. The conscious mind will be able to talk you out of anything, out of the fear of something, pain, losing, regret, disappointment, whatever. But in order for you to row at your best, or anybody to play football, netball, whatever it is, run at the best, that conscious mind needs to go off, and you just need to let the subconscious mind, where all of your skills, all of your training, all those hours that you put in, the conscious mind needs to go blank, so that they can come out, so it doesn't interfere with the physical. And I found that so fascinating, listening to how you created this pattern that allowed you to get into the moment, as you said, and keep the focus as well. Keep focus for 6 to 7 minutes every time. If your mind wandered, that could have been enough for one stroke to be missed and another person to go. And that, as you said earlier, that's the difference between that you getting silver and bronze could have been your mind just having one thought that didn't need to be had in that moment.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, and you know, it's fascinating you telling me the sort of the theory behind it can be learnt.
Yeah,
this isn't something that is you know, a freakish gift. This is something with careful learning you can do. And I do think it takes time and experiments. You know, we always lose more races than we win in sport, you know what I mean? And so it's a case of talking about it, being aware of it. I mean, I did have a couple of psychs that I worked with, one who was an Olympic gold medalist, you know, and, you know, she worked for the EIS and now lives in Canada, you know, and then the rowing, I had the rowing team psychologist, etc. So, you know, we had that support. We also had each other, because I do feel as well, because we're right at the frontier of what you're doing, you often can't you have to define the answers as well as the guys around you.
Yeah.
The one thing I want to leave a little bit with you is that whole mental stuff, because the mental stuff about endurance sport, as in ultra endurance, as in rowing across the Atlantic Ocean. And it's really fascinating, because while those skills that I had to row an Olympic final were amazing and brilliant, they were pretty rubbish at taking you across an ocean. And it was fascinating to be so skillful at the emotional, you know, squeezing out squeezing the cherry and getting everything out of that emotional bit. I then went into a sport where there is chaos. It is complete chaos. There is nothing that you can control. And your own survival is dependent upon the most basic things. And, and if you think about the weather in the ocean, the only predictable thing about it is it's unpredictable.
Yeah.
And, I'd gone from probably the most controlling environment, that you could muster in many ways in rowing, which is a 2,000-meter flat water lake with a skinny little boat, to this wild place that is the Atlantic Ocean. And, going into that environment, we would be rowing 2 hours on, 2 hours off, 2 hours on, day in, day out, and that ability to get up, work, and that your survival, then you're getting to the end. The more you do that, the quicker you get to the end. And I think there's something in life which is, I think the Atlantic Ocean rowing is more akin to the life than it is to, say, the Olympic side, rowing Olympic race, because their life is really chaotic, and you have to realize that you'll be on a real up on one day and then a real down, and this journey, this roller coaster of success or not success, or making progress and not progress. That's more like life.
Yeah.
And and you get really tired, and you get really scared, and you can't see anyone could be motivated on the morning of an Olympic final, but how are you motivated when you're hours and days away from end game, and in life you're months and years away from end game? That's where you're very dependent upon the people around you, and having clarity and vision of where you want to go despite the chaos. And I think there is something in that. But the bit that fascinated me the most was that while I'd been really good at that in Olympic sport, I was rubbish on the ocean. And we got through, and we won loads of medals. Not medals, we won loads of world records and stuff like that. It was amazing. I then subsequently went around and interviewed the guys I rowed with. So there were 5 of us. There were 4. I was the skipper, and there were the 4 other. And 2 of the guys were in their 20s, 2 of them were in their 30s, and I was in my 40s. So quite a cross spectrum,
Yeah.
And it was fascinating how the young guns really mentally probably coped with the whole thing much better.
Right.
I mean, they were pretty much there, they didn't take the decisions that they weren't that difficult to make for them. Do you know what I mean? Whereas but physically, they weren't able to, they felt, 100% when they said they were tired, and they were really tired, they felt that they were working as hard. But I thought the 30-year-olds were able to work closer to what was their maximum.
Yeah.
Because of that maturity gave them that.
Yeah.
So if you ask them how hard they thought they were working, they would have both said the same.
Yeah.
But the older guys were.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether the physical was burning through on their mental side more. We lost 50 kilos between us in weight.
God.
Yeah. So and it was pretty obvious within literally a week of leaving that we were plummeting on the weight. So there were some challenges, things that we, say a blister on your heel never healed. 49 days, didn't heal. The minute you came back to the land, it had gone in a day. You know what I mean? It started to heal. So things didn't heal. It's your body. It's a bit like we move out from, you start out as a petrol engine and you're a diesel engine, so our ability, we were very much burning blood sugar and carbohydrate is our main source, and moving very much into burning much more fat. So the whole adaptation of the body was amazing. So the whole thing was really amazing. But the ability around vulnerability and kindness. So how in the race I was saying, to maximize how you could do it to get the most out of yourself, physical, mental, emotional. On the ocean, or right at the limits of physical capability, and day in, day out, fundamentally believe that there's something around vulnerability and kindness that allows you to achieve more.
Cool.
And I remember, you have to be able to show your vulnerability. So many people and so many in life say, are you okay? Yes, I'm okay. And they won't tell you they're having a really shocking time.
Yeah.
And if you can't tell someone that you're having a shocking time, they can't help you.
Yeah.
So you have to be prepared to open your heart of vulnerability to receive the help that means that you could do another 2 hours? Do you see? Or to finish your 2-hour block?
Yeah.
You know, how do and I think there's something, and we're running out of time now, but there's something, and I don't know whether it's something you want to explore further, but I think there's a real interesting dance between people that are prepared to show vulnerability and resilience at the real edge of possibility.
I think what's coming to my mind there is there's a guy back in the 60s. His work became Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And he had quite a few categories of them, and then somebody else has pretty much come along and narrowed them down to 6 key areas, which is certainty, safety, security, being safe, secure together. And sorry, just let me backtrack a step there. Actually, these Maslow's hierarchy of needs, for those that aren't quite sure what they are, is the things that we need as humans in order to be able to live a fully fledged life, if that makes sense. And the more of these needs that you have taken care of, the further almost like the human spirit can transition up away from survival into thriving. So its lowest level is taking care of certainty, which is, security, safety, food, water, warmth. Then it needs that uncertainty, that variety, that, if every day was the same, it'd be boring. We need stimulation. Then when you get these things taken care of, we can go to significance, being important, being recognized for something in some way, being unique in whatever way it may be. And then connection, that ability for us as humans to connect to others. And that's what was coming through from potentially what he was talking about there, that we as humans, as species, we out-evolved in some respects the other species because we learned how to come together as tribes, women, tribes, men, tribes, children. We kind of overcame the odds of our environment by coming together as one, as tribes. And when we learned that, we were able to then prehistorically or historically, keep the fire going, hunt for food, look after the children, protect each other. And so I'd imagine that in those moments, that vulnerability kind of galvanizes the group even more. This person needs help, and very few people will not help somebody else when they're in need, and often people will help others before they help themselves. So I'd imagine there was that kind of dynamic going on when things were getting dark for you out in those waters.
And I think, and I think if you think about it, often they say that women are actually really good at some of this really extreme stuff. And I think some of that is because they are prepared to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
You often have, and, within girls as well, you'll often have ones that are just, I'm okay. And I do remember one of my crew coming up to me and saying, yeah, everything's amazing. My feet are fine. And you could just see that her feet weren't. Yeah. But she was saying, because she was not allowing the vulnerability to come, she couldn't receive the kindness.
Yeah.
She couldn't go that little bit more. And I think there is something about sport, and especially the more macho side of our sport, that we need to if we really want to be resilient and we really want to go to the edge of possibility, how do we, as leaders, as captains, as coaches, how do we allow people to show that vulnerability, to show that weakness, to receive that kindness? But it's a whole nother talk, I think. But I really like the way you talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, because actually the bit that was missing was the warmth, the security, the fire. That's why we were really struggling, and that's why resilience was really hard. We were right at those basics, but it's an amazing place to be in terms of your body doing exceptional things and thriving. I slept for 2 lots of 90 minutes and then a couple of cat naps in 24 hours, day in, day out. I wouldn't say I would be safe to drive a car, but it was possible and we were alive. Do you know what I mean? And we were able to go out and we were putting in phenomenal power outputs in those 2 hours and recovering in 2 hours and going again. The human body, the human mind and human spirit are phenomenal, amazing.
Infinitely. Potential is infinite. You just gotta, when you get the mind, the body in tune as one, it can do some powerful things, definitely. I'd just like to finish with one last question, if this is okay. Guin, what's your definition or meaning of excellence or sporting excellence? What does excellence and achieving excellence mean to you?
I think it's framed by you as a person, okay, or framed by the team or group you're in. But it's about excellence is when you achieve your potential.
Yeah.
And your potential is defined by your mind.
Awesome. Absolutely awesome. I definitely could keep going for a long time talking with you here, Guin. But I think that's a beautiful way to wrap up what we've been speaking about. As I say, I've got so many other things that I would still like to talk to you about. So maybe another time in the future we come back and have part 2. But I've really enjoyed listening to your story, your journey, your insights, and I just want to thank you very much for coming on and bearing your soul at times and sharing your insights with myself and anybody who watches this. And there's so many powerful kind of resonating messages, tips that people can take, whether they are a young person trying to strive to make it in sport, and somebody who's in there in the thick of sport, somebody who's an amateur who just loves sport, but also, as you said, being out on that sea water where it's rough, unpredictable. That's life in itself. It's up and it's down. You can control certain things, but there's certain things that you can't control, and you've got to ride the wave, I guess, haven't you? So thank you very much, Guin, for coming on and giving up your time. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Rob, I've loved it. Thanks ever so much. It's been great fun.
Thank you.
The Inner Game Podcast, brought to you by the Science of Excellence. Unleash your power. Book your free consultation now.